The first I heard about it was from a poster on the street. It was announcing the decommissioning of an offshore oil rig from the North Sea, presented as a national event, staged in the town. The response was mixed. Some people were against it. They said it would turn the area into a dumping ground, just like what happened in Bangladesh when oil companies left behind their waste. Others saw it differently. They argued the rig was already part of the town's landscape, and the event would bring much-needed jobs to former oil workers. The plan still moved forward. I wasn't paying much attention until my editor asked me to write a piece. By then, it was already being streamed online. A 40,000-ton giant has been selected from dozens of aging platforms in the North Sea for the decommissioning ceremony. The appearance was familiar, just like the one Dad used to work on. But that one had already been dismantled on a distant shore, along with Father's memories and his sense of identity. All that remained were stained sands and polluted waters. Dad strongly supported the idea of decommissioning his performance, a ceremony, a reckoning, a refusal to disappear quietly and irresponsibly. The voyage had been streamed into the dusk. The rig was being dragged and pushed, floating slowly past fields of offshore wind turbines. It was a symbol of radical economic transition and an unannounced cultural shift. I knew it was near, so the next day I went to the site to watch its arrival. Tugboats swarmed around the rig to position it in the right place. At last, it stopped. A siren wailed. One final note. And then, in that hush, the giant lifted itself for the last time. I went back to the dry dock the next morning. The air was heavy, humid, tinged with gasoline and salt. Unlike the spectacle of its arrival, today's performance was all emptiness. Only drones are choreographed in the sky, capturing the platform to help plan the disassembly. This is the first act of the performance. Where the rig is no longer useful, but not yet waste, it is suspended in a cultural limbo, waiting to be taken apart as a show. For me, it sounds like a stunt, or worse, a distraction. But somehow, that daily walk around the dry dock became part of my routine. New structures have been installed around the platform over the past week, all prepared for tonight's show, a scheduled climax for the first phase of the disassembly.
When we celebrate the death of architecture as its birth, dismantling becomes a construction site in reverse. Architects studied the forms and structures to be preserved. Engineers mapped the disassembly, and performance designers staged the sequence of people and tools through light, sound, and motion. When all of this comes together, the performance becomes a narrative device. The optimized path is no longer the only option during the choreography. Should it be rotated, lifted, lowered? Every gesture carries a different meaning. When this comes to the 180-meter jack-up rig, the performative dismantling itself becomes a challenge as its functional building.
On deck, the oil workers returned, not as operators this time, but as performers. They were making pre-cuts for the future disassembly. The same hands that built it, now guiding it towards its end. Agents of extraction now become the agents of unmaking. And slowly, the rig began to change. The helicopter pad was the first to go. Then over the next few months, the drilling tower was dismantled. Different components were scanned, documented, and categorized. The on-deck cranes came down next, carefully disassembled and laid down in sequence. Pieces are choreographed by the ring crane in the sky. Then the buoyant hull, taken apart section by section, laid down to be distributed into the construction industry. Finally, only 3 legs remained, standing still in the dry dock, waiting for the final cue. The final act unfolded, not in grandeur, but in a quiet unraveling. I watched it from the hill above the dry dock, the same place where Dad once waited for his deployment. Below, the ring crane lifted the last leg. The motion was so slow, it felt like time itself had stopped. It rotated, tilted, and finally laid the structure over the marked ground. At last, the skyline became clear. But the performance didn't end. It continued in a different way. An inventory emerged, open for the public to reuse, redesign, and reinvent. The crown of the drilling tower was shipped to London, repurposed as a new building. The intersecting beams were reassembled into a silent memorial, standing quietly in the park. A segment of the retractable leg joined a travelling exhibition across Pacific Island nations, a symbol of extractivism's hidden costs. And some pieces stayed in the town, embedded in its streetscape, fragments of collective memory. Its existence diluted, yet omnipresent. No longer a singular monument, the rig became a series of distributed anti-monuments. In this, the aging oil platform transformed into a different kind of infrastructure. Not a tool of extraction, but a newly visible cultural entity. A memorial, a reflection on a post-industrial landscape. Just as the last piece left the laydown yard, I saw another rig appear, rusted and immense, being dragged toward shore, ready for the next ceremony.